One of the things I hear most often from adult students in particular is the feeling that they get that they're not making any progress. They seem to be practicing and doing their best and getting absolutely nowhere. So that's the topic of today's video. I just want to talk about messy piano progress, because piano progress is messy. It's very easy to become disheartened and feel like you're not getting anywhere, and also feeling like everybody else is getting somewhere, everybody else is doing fine and you're the one who's just going round in circles and not making any progress. But it's just not the case. So recently I've been telling my students that piano progress is not linear. So we expect our progress to go in a nice straight line from beginner up to advanced with no interruptions in between. But actually it's much more of a jagged line like you see in those sales charts where, you know, you have up and down and up and down. But the general direction will be up. If we were to chart our piano progress, we'd find something very similar. So I just want to give you some reassurance that if that's what your experience is at the moment, that you're not alone, you're not unusual. It can often feel like you're going 2 steps forward and 1 step back all the time. And that while you might feel, okay, I've gotten a little bit better in this area, I've absolutely lost ground in another area. So this week, I think I've managed to improve my rhythm, reading a little bit more, but now I can't remember the names of the notes up on the ledger lines. And it's very frustrating, I know. But actually it's not unlike human development in general, particularly if you look at toddlers. Any parent will tell you that when a child seems to leap forward in one area, they often seem to lose ground in another. So again, it's the same thing. It's not linear progress in all areas at once. It seems to be one area will creep ahead a little bit and another area will seem to be static for a while and then that'll creep ahead. So a child who's making big gains, for example, in vocabulary might suddenly seem to lose ground in fine motor control. But it'll catch up over time. And the way we develop a complex skill like learning to play piano is probably very similar in its progress. We gain ground in one area and we seem to go backwards temporarily in another. Another thing I hear students worry about is that they've worked really hard on a piece and they've finished it and they've memorized it, and then they move on to something else and they come back later on to play that first piece and find they've forgotten it, and there's only bits of it that they're able to remember. There's a maxim in piano playing that you need to learn and forget a piece 3 times before you can truly call it part of your repertoire. So if there's a piece that you really love, that you want to hold on to for the long term, it's no harm to let it decay, to let it be forgotten, and then come back and learn it again as if from scratch. Each time you revisit it, the memory of it and your understanding of it deepens and becomes stronger. So it makes a lot of sense to expect that you will forget it and have to relearn it. But eventually that piece will just be part of the music that you know and you won't forget it anymore. And likewise, it's very normal for concepts in music theory, for example, or music analysis not to stick the first time. So the first time I explain the idea, for example, of tonic and dominant to somebody and how that figures in the structure of music can be very difficult for students to take in. But by the time we've gone through 4 or 5 pieces and I've pointed out the structure, it starts to stick, it starts to make sense, and then I find that they start to see it themselves. So for example, it's really useful to have an understanding of tonic and dominant in music and how it relates to the structure of a piece. When I explain that to a student for the first time, it can feel like a very foreign concept. It's only when I've gone through that 4 or 5 times with different pieces that that'll start to make sense, and the student is then able to start seeing it in music themselves. And what you'll often find happening is that out of the blue, you'll suddenly notice that you have improved. So for example, overnight seemingly you understand how to count rhythm and it's not an issue anymore, or certain notes start to become automatic for you to recognize, even though you struggled mightily with them before. So if you do find yourself getting disheartened or wondering if you're making any progress, a really good idea is to sometimes go back and revisit old material that you remember struggling with. So for example, if you're working through a method book and there was a piece 3 or 4 units back that you really took ages to get the hang of, go back now and play it again and see how much easier it is now that you've actually improved and moved forward in other areas. And you'll find that happens again and again. So it might be a good idea in your practice notebook, if you keep one, to make note of what you struggle with, so that on those dark days when you feel like you're getting nowhere, you can go back and look at previous notes and the things that you struggled with before that just aren't an issue for you anymore. And above all, keep calm and carry on. Just have faith that the progress is happening. It just, as I said, is not linear. It doesn't go in a straight line, and you will often feel like you're going backwards, but you're not. Your overall movement is forward. As long as you keep going with it, you will keep making progress. The only way you'll stop making progress is if you actually just give up altogether and quit. Please don't do that. Let me know in the comments if any of this resonates with you and what your experience has been, and I'll talk to you again soon. So in the meantime, happy practicing.